Hey everyone, it's Patty from the Death Chicks and Misty from the Death Chicks. We are back and we are so excited to be here. Now, as you know, the Death Chicks, what we do is talk about all things death, dying, grief, and loss. And of course, we don't want to make light of death, but we do want to make death lighter, more approachable. We really want to be that safe place to land and a place for resources where you can talk about those topics that have been traditionally taboo. So we can talk about them here. Now we're back after a 2-week hiatus. I'm really excited because we've got a couple of things in store for you all. And of course a great guest today that Misty is going to introduce. Again, I'm Patty Burgess, one of the Death Chicks with doingdeathdifferently.com. And Misty, say hello. Misty's in the Arctic.
Hello everyone.
In the Arctic where it's only 20 below or so today. So stay warm, everybody. Anyway, we're thrilled. So what I want to do is, in a minute, just turn it right over to Misty so she can introduce our guest. But I did want to share with you a concept that we're introducing. And what that is the Death Book Club. Is that not great? And I'm telling you, there's a zillion different books out there, but we're going to hone it in and pick the best of the best. What we'd like to do is start with this week telling you a little bit about our book pick, and Misty's going to share that with you. And then each week we're going to talk a little bit about a juicy tidbit in one of these books, and hopefully you'll be inspired to go buy the book, read the book, and share your thoughts with us because there's so much great stuff out there. And this one I think that when you see it you'll love it because it's a great topic, and it's usually something that attracts a lot of people and a lot of interest. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Misty, and we thank you so much for being here. We are back, and the Death Chicks are here to stay for at least the next 8 weeks.
Right on. Thanks so much, Patty. It's great to be back. It's great to be rolling on this. I'm really excited about our guest today, Stephen Garrett. Stephen, if you want to give a little wave. And here he is. We're so happy to have him. When I first met Stephen, I felt really drawn to him because when I was starting on my journey, one of the domain names that I looked for was embracing death, or embrace your death, and that has been a site that Stephen has used. So we really resonate with that, just not only accepting it but embracing it. And talking with Stephen pre-show, he was talking about death can teach us so many things when we make it our friend. So before I jump into introducing him, I want to introduce our book. And our book is, I think it's going to be backwards, but it is The Afterlife of Billy Fingers. And it's written by Annie Kagan. And the by title, subline, is How My Bad Boy Brother Proved to Me There's Life After Death. I loved this read. I loved it because it was easy to read. Usually it takes me a little bit of time to read a book. I could have read this in a day had it not been a Saturday and I had to spend some time playing with my daughter. And then I could have finished it the next day, but it was so good I drew it out over 2 weeks so I could savor it, and it just gets better and better. So a very easy read, a very well written. She's a very nice author, and it was juicy, it was delicious, it was insightful, it was touching, there was some really hard parts. It's such a story of a human life, and mixed in with all this, and especially as you get further into the book, there's these amazing insights from her dead brother about what's on the other side. And the wild thing about it was that it didn't seem like some sci-fi thing, some weird, it seemed like, I felt like, I kind of know this, or I feel like I've been there. Anyhow, it felt like, everyone should know this and be excited about it, really. It in no way does it downplay our wonderful life on Earth. So that's the book. I'm going to put the link in it. Oh, jump in there, Patty.
I just wanted to have you, I coughed in the middle of you holding up the book, and it changed what people got to see, so I would love for you to hold up the book again.
Okay. Let me just get it in the right. Is that it? So The Afterlife of Billy Fingers, and if I move it up, you'll see the author is Annie Kagan, and I'm going to put the link in. So we'll put the link in so everyone will be able to find it. I think it's available on Amazon Kindle for a very reasonable price. I loved having the feeling of a actual book in my hand. So on we go. I hope you all get the book and join us. Anything to add about the book, Patty?
Well, yeah, actually, I ended up getting it on Nook, but I understand that feel about, touching the pages and that kind of thing. I loved the book because it was I won't give it away too much, obviously, but these after-death communications came to this woman who was an ordinary person just like us, and the kinds of insights and the kinds of she was incredulous herself for a really long time and kept requiring and asking for proof, and each time these insights came with more and more information. And in fact, I heard her interviewed on a broadcast, on a podcast, and she basically said, listen, you don't even have to really believe that any of this happened. It's an interesting story whether or not this actually happened to her. So information's great whether you want to believe it or not. If you're a skeptic, great. If you're not, it's going to be even better. So enjoy. Hopefully you'll pick that up and we'll talk more about it.
Okay, very good. So our guest today, Stephen Garrett, he's had over 2 decades of experience in social work. He's worked in adult education. He's worked as a coach, a facilitator, a mentor. He blends spirituality, practicality, humor, and common sense, and he brings this all into the death and dying field. Stephen has a wonderful video that we'll send you the link to later, and it's where he's posing as the Grim Reaper with the dark hood and all the fear that's around death, and how many people fear and they run from it and they want to put up their hoods and no, this isn't happening. But Stephen brings light and love to this subject, and his newest book, he has 3 of them. His newest book is called When Death Speaks, and the subtitle is Listen, Learn, and Love. Stephen has a master's degree in worship training. He has traveled a lot and met spiritual teachers all over the world. And in our brief conversation before the show, where we talked briefly about afterlife, Stephen says that this is something that people around the world kind of know about, but it's a bit of a dark, it's a bit of a secret in the more prominent cultures here in Canada and the U.S. And Stephen's mission is to work to change our culture's relationship with death. He says it's not the enemy, it's not the Grim Reaper. And I'll turn it over to you now, Stephen. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Misty. I'm glad to be here. Patty, it's nice to connect with you, sweetheart, and I look forward to a great chat. By the way, that book, The Afterlife of Billy Fingers, is in my library at home, and it's a great read.
It is, too. We can see all your books. It's beautiful.
Yeah. So it's a great read, and it's very light. It's very matter of fact, and as the author said, you don't have to believe it. It's just a really good story, and what I'm all about is helping stories like that be told so that we can see the diamond that death really is. It's got many faces or many facets, and that's one of them. And so I always encourage my students and the people I work with to read as many different selections of death and dying as they can. Stephen Jenkinson, Stephen Levine, Alan Wolford, they all have their own unique way. Kubler-Ross, James Saunders, they all have their own unique contributions. And Patty, yours, and Misty, yours, and mine are unique contributions as well. So I'm just glad to be here with you all. And you're right, Misty, my mission, which I've taken on, is to change the way we relate with death. Death isn't the issue. Death isn't the bad guy. Death isn't the enemy. Death is a very natural, fundamental, important aspect of life that if we were to embrace it, we would learn so much from it. And just to be brutally honest, to you two ladies and to our listeners, we're all codependent on death. It's my livelihood, my living requires that there be death. I eat fish, I eat wheat, I eat You know, chicken, I drink coffee, those were all living things at one time. And I'm alive because they've died for me to survive. So
Even
let's
plants.
stop making death the enemy.
Yep. Even plants. They have to take one for the team if we're the team. So,
That's right. And that's one of the things, too, that I think causes us difficulty with our relationship with death is we've got this homocentric approach that there's nature and then there's us, and that we're separate from the cycle of life in some crazy way. And I think that's why we created the medical system we have and the save a life at all costs process we have, because we've fallen out of the cycle of life and we think we're above it. And that's to our own peril. It brings out the whole notion of anti-aging and all that kind of stuff, because we're frightened of death. We have to be frightened of aging because aging is the next step to dying. So it's we've got some work to do, and I'm a little embarrassed when Misty was saying that she watched my video dressed up as the Grim Reaper, and then the unveiling of the Grim Reaper into this kind of Patch Adams kind of comical image, you know, with bright yellow shirts and a teal bow tie and red pants and yellow socks. But what I wanted the audience to appreciate or feel was we made up the Grim Reaper. The Grim Reaper is a myth. It's not a real person or a real being. I've searched the world for the Grim Reaper in Peru and Egypt and Africa and India and France and Britain and Canada and Hawaii. There's no such thing. So by showing this picture of the Grim Reaper and having people like frozen by the image and then offering them an option or an opposite, you can stretch that myth apart. And the audience's response was a bit giggly laughy as they saw what we'd done. We created this image. We can do it differently. That's what I'm up to, is let's bring death back to life.
that's very visual. I didn't get all the way through the video, but that is a great way to offer contrast to what our mind is telling us that this Grim Reaper is, to what it really can be. And for many, it can be a friend, a dear friend that informs and shares and offers information and coaching about life. And you mentioned you looked all over like Egypt and Peru, and it's kind of like looking for Bigfoot, I guess. Like maybe it's not really there, so we don't have to waste our time there. We can look at it as a connector instead.
That's right. And a lot of people in the audience, I was quite surprised. That was the first time I theatrically demonstrated what I was up to in my mission. And the audience were, in a way, relieved. It was like this collective sigh of relief. Oh, thank God it's not true. Thank God the Grim Reaper is a figment of our imagination, because people feel in their body there's got to be a better way we can do this. It doesn't have to be so dark and so heavy and so somber and so religiously oriented. There's nothing wrong with a religion, but it could be lighter. It could be more celebratory, and it could be more kind of like almost like a trickster, humorous, cartoonish thing. It could be very different. And
yeah.
so the audience, when they saw the difference, there was this, oh, phew, you know, like a sigh of relief, like the game had been called off. There's a new game we can play.
Yeah, there's an alternative. Yeah, there's I just want to share a comment here. Our friend Sherry Bilal says, death is not the enemy. I love this. Since death comes to all of us and everyone we know and love, it's much more compassionate and kind to hold it in a new light.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for the show and all your guests for helping us to keep looking. Thank you so much, Sherry. We so appreciate having we have some cheerleaders, and Sherry's for sure one of them. Thank you also Julie, who's here with us, Nicola Vac, Kyle Telvin. Kyle, I like Kyle's line. She says on her Google profile line, she says, I want a fun funeral. And I thought, yes, this is, so I really feel, Stephen, your message and our message is really getting out there. And Patty, I have Patty to thank. Patty's Patty's line is doing death differently, and you mentioned that, Stephen. And Patty came up with our Death Chicks logo, which I think is just fabulous because it also has a very fun character kick to it. So good stuff, everyone.
That's great. Wonderful.
Yeah, it's delightful. You know, we were talking before the show, Patty, you and I, about we've all been out there doing our death and dying thing differently, not knowing that we had a brother or a sister somewhere around our space. I mean, I never met you before, Patty. It's like you and I had been together forever. We have the same heart vibration. Like it's so cool to meet you. And
Wonderful.
for me as a death advocate, like I think I'm death's advocate, it's great to know that there's others out there with their oars in the water paddling the same way. And it's very inspiring to know that we've got brothers and sisters out there that really do want to make a difference in the way North America handles death and dying.
Absolutely, Stephen. I do feel the same way. I'm thrilled. And you mentioned 3 years ago. So going back a little bit, just so we can get a feel for how you got started, you know, it's not every day that people just say, oh, I think I'll do something in the death market. Is there a death market? I don't know. If there is a death market, I want to know. I'm probably in it. But how did you get started with this whole approach to your spreading this message?
Well, Patty, it's a bit of a long story. It started way back in 1988 when my dear sister Jody passed away suddenly and unexpectedly. I used to be a stockbroker and worked with money and did the corporate thing. And when my sister passed, I tried to negotiate with God to get her back. I tried to, you know, offer my ping golf clubs, my BMW, my stock options. God would have nothing to do with it. My sister was dead, and it was up to me to deal with it in a very real and raw way, which I did, and recognized that those things I had been striving for weren't as valuable as I thought they were. My sister was extremely valuable. My bank account wasn't so. So a year later, I quit. I walked away from a very rewarding, financially successful career and became a social worker because I wanted to work deeply with people and help people who needed some help for a while. And that transformed into becoming an author and an inspirational coach and a spiritual teacher. And at the end of that career, I thought, there's got to be something else I can do. What is it my community needs? And my relationship with what I call grandmother, or you might call God, is God feels like a grandmother to me. And she said to me one day, she said, well, you got some time on your hands, eh? I said, yeah, I do. She said, I'd like you to change the way North America does death and dying. Would you be up for the challenge? I thought, you got to be kidding, you know? That's 500 million people, you know? But I sat with it for a while, and I felt my heart deeply, and my heart had a big yes. My mind is going, oh man, I mean, that's not on the national occupations classifications. There's no like death coach. I mean, how am I going to make a living? And you know, I don't have a PhD, and all the nonsense came up. But my heart said, just get your ass out there and let's start to work towards changing the way our culture does death and dying. So I jumped on board about 3 years ago. I wrote a book called When Death Speaks, Listen, Learn, and Love, and I've been out there shooting my mouth off ever since, and happily we're making progress here in Vancouver, Canada, and in British Columbia. So
wonderful, wonderful. So what would you say, you know, we talk about how fear of death can keep us from really living, and I know that that's maybe not your exact words, but what would you say the consequences of this denial and this fear are?
Oh gosh, Patty, that's a huge question. There are enormous consequences for us. If you take a look at the way we warehouse our elders and put them in long-term care homes or seniors' homes, and we push them away because they represent death, in each of those bodies is life wisdom that's required by the younger generations if we're to live well and survive well and live with a passion for life. That's one consequence. Our natural wisdom goes untold. Those people who are in seniors' homes and long-term care facilities also lack the opportunity to make meaning of their life, so they get ripped off. Then there's the whole financial piece. I mean, we spend half of our annual healthcare budget on 5% of the people in the last 10 months of their life, which demonstrates our absolute fear of death and dying. Never mind the notion that the seed of fear of death grows into, I don't want to quit my job, I'm afraid of change, I don't want to leave my relationship, I'm afraid I won't get another one. Those are mini deaths: the death of a career, the death of a relationship, the death of a pet, the death of a personality, the death of a brand. All those mini deaths are also losses because we're afraid of the big death of the body. So we're paralyzed in North America. We just don't know how to live real well because we're so afraid of dying.
So interesting, and I bet you Wall Street thought you were bonkers when you decided to leave and become a social worker. I mean, that's like, to them, that's like a big death, I'm sure.
Absolutely, and it was a death to me as well.
I bet.
Because I was so identified by the suits I wore, the financial abundance I had, the people I knew, the theaters I would go to, the evenings out, and the business expenses. That was how I was identified. So in a way, I had to kill me off as a stockbroker to rebirth me as a social worker. In, you know, reincarnation, there may be past lives and all that kind of stuff. There is reincarnation in our actual life on this planet at this time. I was a stockbroker, now I'm a death coach. That's a reincarnation. It's very practical. So you're right, allowing myself to die as I knew myself to be reborn was a very powerful step.
That's really a very interesting way to put it, because now that you look at it that way, between past lives and this particular life, I am must be the queen of reincarnation, because I certainly have reinvented several times.
Totally.
You too, I bet, Misty, because you know you and I talked about that. You know, there's so much out there, and we've each, I think, reiterated a couple of times. I don't know if we're hearing you.
There we go. I was muted. Sorry about that. Yeah, I think the whole thing about letting parts of ourselves die in order to continue to live more fully is almost necessary, because there's only so much room in our brains and maybe in our hearts. I tend to think our hearts are more unlimited than our brains, but in order to fully connect with and feel into our own human potential, first we do, I believe, like Stephen did, is let go of parts of us that may not be serving us in order to continue up the ladder of our own consciousness, or however you frame it, to become who we're really called to become. And kudos to you, Stephen, for listening to that grandmother, the great grandmother goddess in the sky, or however she appears to you. We each have our own spiritual connections, but that was a tall order, and you stepped up for it. So I'm wondering, our listeners, if our listeners are interested in rebuilding their relationship with death, or if they're interested in having the difficult conversations with their loved ones about death and dying. And often some people, they just shut that door. You open it, or you try and peep in, or can we go here, and they'll slam it shut and say, nope, not going there. So I'm wondering if you have any advice on how we can begin these difficult relationships and difficult conversations.
Yeah, it's really an art form. You know, people often ask me, is there a formula? Is there a recipe? Is there a way to have these conversations? Can you give me the 1, 2, 3 ABC? And I say to them, I wish I could, but I can't. There are components of a conversation, or colors. There are aspects of a conversation, or brushes, that we can use and dabble with as we paint the canvas of the people we're working with. But the same approach doesn't work with a different family. The thing I've learned, though, that's consistent and common is our own authenticity, our own boldness, or our own approach to death. That needs to be fully in the conversation. we can't kind of sit back and be professional and sort of unhuman to have a very human conversation. I'll give you one example of a family I worked with in Saskatchewan, Canada. Mom was dying of cancer. She had 6 months to go. It was terminal. She was palliative. Nobody in the family wanted to talk about it, especially Mom, because it's so real and it's so raw and it's so finite. So the family called me in, and I just walked into their dining room. We sat down. Mom came and sat down. So we were sitting in a circle around the table. And I was a bit nervous. You know, I mean, here's a conversation they don't want to have, and I'm the death guy. As I walked in the room, they weren't so happy to see me because it meant we were going to have a difficult conversation. However, I put my full loving attention on the mother. Her name was Vivian. And for some reason, I called her honey. I don't know why. I just trusted my heart. I said, honey, I know this is going to be a really difficult conversation for you to have. It's about your end of life and about your terminal palliative situation with cancer. It's important we talk about it, and I gave her some reasons. And then I stopped and I said, have I got your permission to continue with this conversation? And she looked at me, and there was a little tear running down her cheek, and she couldn't say yes, but she couldn't say no, so she went, mm-hmm, and nodded her head. So I said, awesome, thank you. Then I went to her husband and said the same thing. And I said to him, it must be difficult for you to watch a woman you've loved for so long be dying right in front of your very eyes. How's that for you? And he opened up. And then I spoke to the two daughters, and they opened up. And before we knew it, the five of us were having a death. And I could feel the family kind of take this inhale. And they all went, whew. Because each one of them wanted to have the conversation. Each one of them knew it was important. They just didn't know how. So it required somebody outside the family to bring some boldness and some compassion to the table so they could begin the conversation. The beautiful piece of this story is not the fact that we had the conversation, but the fact of the result of that conversation, which was she got all her paperwork done. She planned out the last 6 months of her life. She planned out her funeral. She planned all these celebrations, and they had a ball living fully for the last 6 months of Vivian's life. So that's an example of how it can work, but that was only that piece of artwork. It would be different for a different family.
Well, you came to the table authentic. Yourself. You came with, as you mentioned, that loving attention, and I think when someone brings themselves boldly like that with a request, and the other thing I think was beautiful is that you asked for permission. And I think if it were me, I might have a tear going down my face just for the very fact that you asked. I know, having been with my own mother when she was dying, and a very strong woman at that, but it seemed like over that time, the previous 6 months, people weren't asking her permission a lot. People were just kind of going about having an expectation, or not even talking to her, talking to everybody else about her, which is something I'd like to see changed in the healthcare system. And true to form, my mother, one day when we were getting checked in for yet again another hospital stay, as the young woman checking her in was talking to me, she said, "Hey, you, look over here. I'm the patient. Talk to me." Yeah. And I thought, good on you, Mom. You know, and I, who would care very much about that, had not even considered that that was an issue till she brought it to the attention. So I think that's beautiful, asking permission. It sets the stage, the tone, really wonderfully for many people who feel marginalized, I think, in so many ways.
Yeah. So many ways. And your point is very appropriate, Patty. I started with Vivian intentionally because she's the one who's dying. She's actively dying. And I want to talk to her and make it intimate and personal, because most often we don't make it intimate and personal in the hospital setting. We just, like they talk to somebody other than one who's dying, yeah, like they're incapable or they're somehow stupid. No, they're just dying. and they need to be spoken to in a human, loving, compassionate way. Makes a huge difference.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in those scenarios, people who are facing the end of life are losing so much control in every area, from the simple pleasures that they may have had to the losing the very people in their life who they love, and to have you give her control in this example, or anyone that we're working with, to give control over, can we proceed with this conversation? Because if we can't, we won't. And I think that alone provides the opening for someone to feel like, wow, I'm heard even before I open my mouth. I think that's really something.
Yeah, Patty, we tend to disempower those who are dying. We take away control. We call the shots. The doctors, the nurses, the healthcare system, the hospice people tend to remove the individual from their very own personal dying process. I'm all about empowering. I mean, I coined a phrase the other day called self-determined death. I want to say in how I go out of here, and I want to say in who's around my bed, and I want to say what goes in my face and what goes in my body, and I want to say in what I don't want. So it's about empowering those of us who are actively dying and giving them their say back, because they've had their say their whole life. Why should they not have their say in their dying?
Right. Yeah, and I think. Oh, go ahead, Miss. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that's part of the big fear around death, is because so many of us, especially as we get older, we watch our loved ones go through this hugely disempowering process, and of course we don't want to be there, and there's not a lot of options. Now there is Patty's program and the work you're doing, Stephen, it is opening up options for alternatives, but for so many years we've seen these people that we've looked up to and we've respected, and they've been the leaders and the strength for us. We see what it comes to at the end, and largely because of the result of our system. And yeah, I'd be afraid too. So I think that maybe I haven't thought of this before, but maybe that's part of why I'm doing this too. It shouldn't be like that. There's a comment that's kind of along this lines, and I'm just going to look for it. Let's see. It was something about having a party. Oh, here it is.
Oh,
by
yes.
Jean Sabri. So let me see. So she says, one day my son, whom Patty knows, came home from high school and said, when you die, you want us to have a big party, right? Years later, I told my elderly, wonderful aunt what he had said. She said, hey, if you think you're dying, tell him to have the party now so you can enjoy it. So,
so glad
you know, yeah, let's party while we can, and let's say, yes, I am dying, so, you know, let's have a party. Let's bring everyone together. Let's plan it out, and let's put it on the table and look at it and talk about it, and be together in love and laughter and light while I still can dance. Yeah.
That is so great. And Jeannie, thanks for sharing that. If you're still watching, I'm thrilled. We'll definitely be talking more about that. But to your point, Misty, you know, I don't know about anybody else, and maybe I am odd, but come on. If you're honest, haven't you all kind of pictured your own funeral at some point? Haven't you pictured your own death? I have. And what I didn't like about it is that I wasn't moving. And so I definitely want that party, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to plan probably something if I know and I have time, and if it's not sudden or anything like that. I want a funeral party, and I think that's right now unheard of, but I bet you we're going to start to see more of it. The more all of us come out and start talking and sharing and realizing that there's this to me, death is the great connector. Grief is the great connector. And why wouldn't we do this? And if nothing else, if nobody shows up because they're just curious, well, they're going to have a darn good time, because it'll be one hell of a party, I'm sure.
I remember, Patty and Misty, when my father died, he had a lot of friends. And he's lying in a casket and he's dead. And all his friends are coming by saying all these wonderful things to his kids about him. And I thought, this is a ripoff, man. Lloyd should be like awake in the casket hearing these great things that people are saying about him. And so, and that was about 7 or 8 years ago now. And I thought to myself, before I go, all my friends are going to say really cool shit to me because I want to hear it, like, and I want to share back with them. I want to have a fun party that we can all kind of have this love fest, because I'm an old hippie, you know. I was born and raised in the hippie days.
I know. I kind of sensed that. That's pretty cool. I sensed that.
Yeah.
Everything kind of threw me off.
Yeah. So it's and I think it's important that people have the opportunity to say goodbye well.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times in our grief process, after the death has occurred, because we're so hopeful and we're struggling for them to live, we don't get to say goodbye well. And there's regrets in people's lives after that, oh man, I should have told my dad one more time how much I loved him. I should have told my wife one more time how great she was and what a wonderful woman she was and what a great mother she was. Because we fight so hard for life, we typically forget to do our goodbyes well. And that's another reason why I'm so strong in this embrace your death, accept your death thing, because it can give us a beautiful opportunity to celebrate with the person who's dying their importance to us as individuals. And that's really meaningful for them.
That's a great point, Stephen. And I think I really resonate with the point about the feelings, because all of a sudden, often it's sudden. Sometimes we know, but often it's sudden. And then we're fraught with emotion, and it's not little emotion. When someone close to you, it's huge, and it's often feelings we've never felt before, and they're so big that many of us don't know how to handle them, or our logical thinking, that the part of the brain that says, gee, I really want to say this to mom before she goes, or those things that in a calm, peaceful state of mind we'd know exactly what we wanted to do, those kind of fly out the window when we're hit with sudden death or sudden sickness, and then there's all the practicals, paperwork, all that stuff that has to be taken care of. So I think it's so important, the work that we're doing, to talk about it now, to prepare, to have everything in place, to say what needs to be said, to have the conversations, and also to prepare emotionally too, because as much as you can, but at least if we start talking about it soon, we can have the basics ready. So thanks.
Yep. It's important also to trust your heart and risk a little bit. I have a student who used to be a client in Edmonton, Alberta, a little closer to you, Missy. It's up north. And she plays the cello. Her cello teacher was dying of cancer and was in the hospital and had days or weeks to live, not very long. She didn't really want to go and see her teacher dying. She didn't really want to end that relationship, because her cello teacher, when she was 6, was really important to her. And I just asked the question, I said, what would happen if you took your cello to the hospital and went into her room and sat down and played for her? You don't have to talk to her. If you're afraid, you don't know what to say, just play for her. And she was a nurse in the hospital where her teacher was, and she thought, oh, that I could do. And so as a good coach, I said, well, and when would you like to get that done by?
A little accountability.
Exactly. And she said, I'll do it tomorrow after my shift. So she took her cello to work, the hospital. She walked into her teacher's room after her shift was over. She sat down and played her ass off. The cello teacher was like weeping deeply. The hall was full of nurses, all just so like, what's going on in there? The teacher got that she taught one student how to play the cello well. Her life had meaning. And people got to see that there's beautiful ways to say goodbye that don't have any words to them. I get emotional about that story because it was so beautiful. And it was risky for sure, but her heart was demanding that she go play for her teacher. So she trusted it with a little encouragement from the bald white guy, and that a beautiful ending. So that's the kind of thing that can happen if we take the box away from our mind about how death and dying has to be or should be or traditionally has been.
So
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
what a really wonderful example of being present. Being present without words can be so powerful and so life-changing for both involved. And I love that you say taking a little risk, because every day we do that, and I think we forget that by not taking a risk, um, we may lose one of the most life-changing opportunities. I think so many people pull back from something that is fearful when if we could just lean in just a little bit, leaning in emotionally, sometimes even I'll do it even physically if I'm experiencing some kind of fear so that I can practice that experience of moving forward. And usually I'm pretty darn surprised by some amazing things that I could have never otherwise imagined and would not have come. So I think that's great, great advice. Great advice.
It's interesting, Patty, that risk piece that you're just talking about is also linked to the fear of death.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, people will never see it that way if they don't want to.
Yeah. Because if I'm afraid to have a piece of me die, a way people know me, i.e. if I went into the hospital and played a cello for my teacher, that's risky business. That means something of me has to be shown up and something of me has to be let go. All death is something once was, now it isn't. Risk is the same thing, or change is the same thing. Something once was, now it isn't. I used to be proper, now I'm a little improper. So it's all linked, and that's another reason why us guys and gals are pushing death so hard. Is if we embrace death and bring it back to life, we also bring back change and risk and that kind of stuff that makes life way more juicy and way more special and new each day.
Yes. I'll jump in here. On my bulletin board for quite some time now is the quote, and it says, "Joy lives at the edge." And I really resonate with what you say, Stephen, because I feel that unless I'm out on the edge, pushing my comfort zone, pushing my boundaries, I'm not really feeling it. I'm not really tingly with excitement. And there is a little bit of fear in there. And Patty, you said, like, playing with that fear and leaning into it instead of shrinking back. But it's a powerful thing. And embracing our death really invites us to go there. Go those places that might be a little bit uncomfortable. But, geez, when we go there, like, the whole world can open up. It's a wonderful thing. There's one comment here about that. I'm gonna bring it up from Julie, and Julie's been on our show before, Stephen, and she says, like a snake sheds its skin, we have to do a deep peel to get to our next level of growth. And I just clicked it off. But thanks for that, Julie. It's a beautiful. It really sums up, I think, what our conversation has been getting to. And I'm going to do a quick thank you, share of some of our viewers, because we really appreciate you. Rain's here, Rain Dowell. She's been a great supporter as we've been moving along. And there's Sherry and Jean. There's Nicole. Sheila Hensley has helped us out technically in the past. Thanks so much for being here, Sheila. Lori, Jeremy. Roxanne, she's new. Thanks for joining us, Roxanne. I mentioned Kyle. Mark and Heidi have also been very supportive of our show. There's Donna Belt, Carolyn Darden, Scott Scowcroft. Thank you, Scott. Very much a supporter of ours. So just a little shout out for our viewers and all the people that are helping us to move this forward.
Absolutely, that's great. And I noticed too, I'm not sure if you mentioned Kyle Tevlin, who's, I think, my new friend and my new neighbor. She's in Doylestown. It looks like she's watching, Doylestown, PA. So it's going to be neat, Kyle, to get together with you and see all the different things that we share. And was that Nicole as well, Levesque? So We just are blessed. And Jeannie, who is one of the comments you put up, happens to be my son-in-law's mom, and I'm just thrilled to see her on here. It surprised me. So,
Wow.
what is that, Jeannie? Thanks for coming. We're really honored to do this because, you know, when Misty and I started out, talk about some fear, the Google Hangout thing, you know, why does anybody want to talk about death? And next thing you know, it's like you put your art out there, and then people showed up. And then next thing you know, we meet wonderful guests like you, Stephen, and perhaps we'll have some collaborations. And that, to me, is just the goodie that comes from leaning into that fear. And there's, I guess, what's that saying? Do something that you fear every day, because I really think something will come back, some good juice.
You know, it's interesting in this whole death thing, Misty and Patty. It's risky business, and what I've noticed about me, and I noticed about you, Patty, and about you, Misty, is poker players. They're sitting around a table, and they're betting, and one guy decides, I'm going all in.
Yeah.
And you see him, he takes his hand or her hand, and he pushes all of their chips into the center of the table, and their hand stays on top of the chips for what feels like an eternity. And then they take their hand off their chips and they go, I'm all in. And the table changes. Like, people come to life around the table because somebody's all in. Well, to be a death coach or a death guru or a death shaman or an end-of-life guide, you got to be all in. When you go all in the way you two ladies have and the way I have, magic starts happening. Because it's an energetic magnet. And the universe goes, wow, those guys are all in. We're going to start to connect some dots for them. And grandmother or God or the divine or the one or, you know, whatever you want to call it, starts to move when there's commitment and boldness, and the magic starts to show up. So I really honor you two ladies for your courage and your all-inness. I mean, to set up a page called, you know, the Death Chicks is like, wow, that's so cool. And it's so not North American. It's like, I'm cheering for you.
That is so funny, because we did have a few discussions over the Death Chicks, and I don't know, I thought there was something there.
And there is.
Yeah.
It's
a good one. It's a great one. I was hesitant at first. I was like, I don't know. Patty, I love it. It's what we're about 100%. It cracks me up. It's totally, you know, it's light and laughter next to death, like the Death Chicks. It's almost like chicks. It's almost sexy. Like, can we do this? Is this too bold? I thought it might be a bit much. And I honestly, I thought she might just forget about the idea, and we were throwing a few names around. But she didn't. No, she didn't. And then she plowed ahead and then made a logo. And after I saw the logo, well, I was all in for sure. I mean, I just loved it. So thank you so much, Patty, for bringing that out. And thank you for Stephen for being a cheerleader, and all the other people who are here. And we're doing it. We're doing it, and I encourage all the listeners to start talking about it, and in a light way, in a fun way, and let's change the world.
Yeah.
We'll do it.
Talk about it. Don't start doing it, but start talking about it. We'd rather have you around for a while. But if you do have to go, at least you know you've got one heck of a community that can support you. And you know, speaking of, like, I think there's a big difference between, obviously, sudden tragic deaths.
Yes.
And certainly we're not talking about making light of those, but we can talk about making meaning, I think, of those, because every life matters, whether it's here or whether it's gone. But I think the beauty of having a long trajectory of an illness, like a cancer or something else, is that every day gives us time to begin again to be brave and be a little risky. Because once we know that somebody's facing that doesn't mean that they're going to, that may be end of life. And there's times where we know that end of life is imminent no matter what. Or when somebody has said, I no longer want to seek curative care, but I want comfort measures. Those are the times that are, to me, so precious that we can really practice being risky and bold. and authentic and loving and soft at the same time. We don't have to beat somebody over the head with let's talk about your death, and you'll be able to take those cues. But wow, we are given so much time in that respect, and the longer medical science keeps us alive, the more time we have to practice this. So, you know, it's a gift given every day.
Patty, you're right about the sudden and unexpected deaths and suicides. They are grim, and it's not about making light of that. But what happens with sudden, unexpected deaths, including suicides, is people make the error of trying to make sense out of it. And you used a word that I feel very strongly about. It's not about making sense of what happened. You can't. It doesn't make sense on a human level. But it can be made meaning of. In other words, we can make meaning of the life that was lived, whether it was 6 days old or 60 years long or anything in between. We can make meaning of it, and that's way more refreshing and uplifting for the family than trying to figure it out and make sense of it.
Yeah, that's good. I hadn't really ever heard it put that way, not making sense, because who can when those kinds of things? You're talking with a parent who's lost a child, lost a child at all, let alone violently. I can't even imagine what that would feel like. Yet you do see those very same people go on to create foundations or create communities or whatever it was around that person's life that touched, you know, who touched others. So lots to be said for that. And I hope in the future we are going to be bringing on, I think we've talked about bringing on some people who have had that loss experience, who have found a way to get through. I don't know if I could. I'm not a bio parent, but I can't even imagine with my stepchildren how that would feel. But I think there's other people that have paved the way for us to understand that a little bit more, and we'll bring those folks on as well.
I've got a great guest for you two ladies. His name is Steve Doling. He's written a book called I'll Shave My Head Too. And it's all about his experience as a father who lost his son to cancer. And it's incredible. It's rich. It's authentic. It's him writing what was going on for him as a father, watching his young son die in front of his eyes. And it's a brilliant book. And I'd really encourage you guys to. I can link you up with him because he's a friend of mine.
Yes, we'd like
and a fellow author. And it's a beautifully rich, raw, poignant, humorous account of a father's life as he walked with his son who was dying.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad this came up because since we started the Death Chicks, Patty and I have discussed this and how we want to bring light to death and make it not the Grim Reaper, but there's some heavy subjects, and how do we talk about that? We have had a guest talk about suicide, and we are planning to bring people on to talk about loss of a child, which is very different from someone gets old and dies. It all happens to everyone. So I'm glad we brought this up, and I hope we still have viewers here, and we'll be passing that on, and Stephen for sure will take you up on that, and I think this has been an absolutely wonderful interview. Really appreciate you taking time out today and joining us. I don't know if we have that comment. Stephen can share with us what you have going on right now, and if there's anything you'd like to share with our listeners.
Yep, it's my mission is to change the way North America relates to death. That's 500 million people. It's a lot of conversations, so I'm unable to do it on my own. So I've created a training program called End of Life Guide Training, which is all about teaching people how to have those difficult conversations first with yourself and your family, and then with others around you. So it's got to be done first at home before you take it out to community. And it's all about teaching people how to compassionately be bold around this very important topic. So I've got that going on, and I've got a book out there called When Death Speaks, Listen, Learn, and Loves. So folks can go to my website, embraceyourdeath.com, or endoflifeguidetraining.com, and they can track me down and see me there, and come on along for the joy. It's a real adventure. It's a great ride, bringing death back to life, and I just invite anybody who's got it's kind of like a heart pull. You know, it's not like a logical, you know, I'm going to make that business choice and become a death coach. But if your heart's drawn to it, please feel free to get in touch with me. I'd love to chat with you and just get to know you as a human being and spread the good word.
That's lovely. That is absolutely lovely. Let me mention that again. It's Stephen Garrett. That's it's Stephen, correct?
Correct.
Stephen Garrett, Garrett, embraceyourdeath.com and endoflifeguidetraining.com. And there's a lot of great information on there. I've been to your site, and if you can stumble on to his, I'm going to go watch the rest of it, to his Grim Reaper theatrical debut. I was like, wow, this guy has a theatrical streak with him on the road. And I also, before we go, I wanted to mention something else too that we had talked about pre-show, is that, you know, if you notice, we've had a lot of, we're women, we're the Death Chicks, we've had women on the show, we've had, I think, one male guest, our good friend Terry, and it is delightful to see, we don't see as many men who are really led by their heart out there, and so it is really refreshing to see that, and seems like you're connected with other men too, so I really would invite men, women, this conversation. We've all got hearts. We're all going to die. Who needs more of a connector than that, right?
That's right.
Yeah, great stuff. And Stephen, also, I'm not sure if how familiar you are with Google Hangouts, but at the end of the show or at any time, this event page is locked in time. It's here forever, and there's been many wonderful comments come up, so feel free to jump in and interact with people, or sometimes people have questions, and it's a nice way to interact after the show, so we welcome you to do that, and we'll be posting your links up there for the viewers if they want to, for an easy connect. So
awesome.
Yeah, thanks.
And I just noticed that Sherry wants all of us three to hang out with her when she's dying. It's a date, girl, especially if I can come to California.
Absolutely, man.
You're so cute.
Yes, it'll be a great celebration. Sherry's from Simply Celebrate, and we're looking forward to having her here as a guest very soon. So yeah, lots of good things to come. And before we sign off, I do want to just share again The Afterlife of Billy Fingers. It's a really enjoyable read regardless of what your beliefs are, what your experience is. Annie Kagan, and we'll hope you'll join us in this read. We'll spend about 5 minutes each show just talking about it briefly. And then for our last show of round 2, on our 8th show, we're hoping to have a conversation about this book, and we're going to, Patty and I, if we're feeling brave, if we're taking the risk, and if there's enough interest in the book, we're going to have what's called jumpers on Google HOAs, and that's when people in the audience, we send them the link, and they jump in, and there's on the film strip, just like Patty and I and Stephen are right now, and we can have up to 10 people all talking about this book, so that could be very exciting. So thanks to everyone who have inspired us and challenged us to move forward in this fun venue, and now we have a death book club, so please do join us there.
All right. So here we are with just a minute ago. I want to thank everybody. Misty, thank you so much for being the incredible co-host that you are, and finding Stephen and this wonderful conversation today. Stephen, thank you. Remember to go to embraceyourdeath.com or endoflifeguidetraining.com. I'm Patty from Doing Death Differently, and we will be talking again.
Awesome.
All right. Bye for now, everyone.
Bye. We'll see you next time.
See you same time next week.
You
Bye,
got
everybody.
it. See you all then. Bye.
Bye-bye.